Ni hao, students. This is Mr. Howard in episode 4, in which we're going to be talking about the Mongols. To begin with, the sources that I used to prepare for this, again, I've been using the tried and true China, A New History book is a wonderful overview of a dynastic China, and part of that does play into what we're talking today about this group of people called the Mongols. I also used another book called The History of Russia. Russia also had some experience with the Mongols, and there's an excerpt actually we're going to be using that I think is really pertinent to our conversation today. I used the Atlas of World History, gave a wonderful kind of visual overview of the spread of the Mongol Empire throughout Asia. And then two web-based sources. John Green's Crash Course World History has a great video about the Mongol Empire. And then I referred to the Wikipedia article, The Mongol Empire, which by itself is informative, but taken in with everything else proved to be exceedingly trustworthy. Okay, so to start out, just a simple overview. The Mongols are one of many ethnic groups that come from Eastern Central Asia. This would be north of China, in fact, north of the Great Wall. The Great Wall, over time, had been constructed and developed as a barrier to nomadic groups that lived north of China that would often come down and raid and take livestock, property, wealth. The Mongols was one group of many groups that would do this. They originally were nomadic. They would travel on horseback. They were herders. They learned how to ride horses very early, became skilled in riding horse, and they used a bow called a composite bow. It was made from a composite of several different materials glued together, became very practiced at using this on the back of the horse. They lived in something called a yurt, which if you can imagine a tent with kind of semi-rigid sides, in effect that's what it is. They're portable, they can be put up in an afternoon, but can fit a family group, protect them from the harsh climate of the steppes of Central Asia. One of the most notable things, and why we're talking about the Mongols today, in its kind of connection with the history of China, is that they built the largest contiguous empire in the history of the world. That means we're talking about the largest empire with all of it connecting. While the British Empire was larger, theirs was the largest contiguous land empire. It was more than 24 million square miles and constituted 16% of the world's land area. And in the time period we're looking at, and this is not necessarily going from the absolute beginning to the absolute end, but just kind of at the most notable beginning point and the most notable end point for our purposes. In 1206, the Mongol Empire was proclaimed by its founder, Genghis Khan. And we'll be going all the way to 1368 with the collapse of the Yuan dynasty, which was a Mongol dynasty in Imperial China. As I said, it began with a man named Genghis Khan. His birth name was Temujin. He was born north of the Great Wall, so in this area that what we would recognize as present-day Mongolia. His people were not literate. They didn't know how to read and write. They relied on other people to do that as their empire grew. And so therefore, some of the basics about his early life are kind of myth and legend. He supposedly killed his brother at a young age. I think he was 8 or so when he was fishing. We do know he was married. He had many different children. There's some stories that talk about how his wife was kidnapped, and he went and reclaimed his wife from this other Mongol tribe that kidnapped her, and through diplomacy and violence, he was able to unite the Mongol tribes. And this is the most important key part. This starts way back in 1206. He united all the Mongols, and then they began to conquer parts of Asia. Genghis Khan had ambition to build an empire. Most of this is in this middle part of Asia called Central Asia, starting in Mongolia, going a little bit west and going into northern China. This was this middle band. You can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes. By 1227, they had conquered a good part of this central part of Asia. It would reach its furthest extent under his grandchildren. In 1279, by 1279, they'd gone as far as conquer all of Russia. They've gone all the way to the Middle East, as far as Iran and Iraq. They've conquered Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Korea. They've gone over into Eastern Europe and into the Ukraine. And in fact, it's easier, honestly, to describe what they hadn't taken. When you're looking at the continent of Asia, they had not been able to successfully invade India. That's in southern Asia. They had not been able to successfully invade Japan. They had been beaten in Egypt, had not been able to invade Turkey. Okay, but if you're looking at a map of Asia, they pretty much had everything else. They're known for their ruthlessness. When we're looking at large empires, one thing that typically comes out, and the Mongols are an exception, when you have an empire that grows so rapidly, we're talking in, less than 80 years, not even 100 years, we have the largest land empire in the history of the world. And this is 800 years ago. It still stands to be true. Usually empires that grow rapidly like this have a lot of success militarily. That's definitely true about the Mongols. They had used tactics, lightning fast strikes on horseback using bows that other kingdoms and empires at the time did not have a response to. They were also exceedingly ruthless. A couple points. One, there's a story of this Central Asian empire called the Khwarezmid Empire. It's kind of in Central Asia, east of Iran. And according to the story, Genghis Khan had sent some diplomats there to establish relationships with the Sultan, who is the king of this empire. The Sultan decided, and not sure exactly why, I haven't been able to find any written records of the conversation. I had decided that he didn't want any relations with the Mongols, had all the diplomats executed and their heads delivered back to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, in response, decided to wipe this empire from the face of the earth, which he successfully did. They captured the capital city. They killed everybody inside. They tore down the capital city. This place, this kingdom, which had survived for centuries right in Central Asia along the Silk Road, is wiped from history after this. Okay, nothing. There's no remnants of it to this day. I mean, archaeologists, historians, they can find evidence of it, but after this point, this culture is just gone. Another example. This was written in 1245. Somewhere between 1245 and 1246, an Archbishop Plano Carpini was a papal legate. That means he was a diplomat for the Pope, sent to the Mongol Empire, to Mongolia. He's traveling through Russia, and this is what he wrote. They went against Russia and enacted a great massacre in the Russian land. They destroyed towns and fortresses and killed people. They besieged Kiev. Kiev at the time was the capital of Russia, which had been the capital of Russia, and after a long siege, they took it and killed the inhabitants of the city. For this reason, when we passed through the land, we found lying in the field countless heads and bones of dead people. For this city had been extremely large and very populous, whereas now it had been reduced to nothing. Barely 200 homes stood there, and those people are held in the harshest slavery. While the Archbishop might have been exaggerating, there's enough stories of similar ilk to clearly indicate that something had happened, that the Mongols were this vicious. Okay, so what did they accomplish? Well, besides developing the largest empire in the history of the world, largest contiguous land empire in the history of the world, which still stands today, the record still stands, they had kind of been, I wouldn't call this forward thinking, but they did promote cultural diffusion. They had established in this part of the world, in the Middle East and Asia and part of Eastern Europe, this Pax Mongolia, this Roman peace, as historians called it, which allowed for cultural diffusion throughout the area. Culture spread very easily because everybody was afraid of the Mongols, and so no one was willing to go against that. They promoted religious freedom, unlike a lot of many other empires. And John Green referred to them, the Mongols, as the exception. As many other civilizations, looking at the past, were not open to divergent religious beliefs. The Mongols were the exception. They did not push their religion on other people, and they allowed the citizens of their empire to practice their own religion. The Silk Road became this was kind of a high point for the Silk Road and mercantilism, economic trade back and forth, which is definitely a part of cultural diffusion. They used something called the Yam system. John Green described that basically merchants who had this special badge were able to pass freely throughout the Mongol Empire. They established the Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan, which is Genghis Khan's grandson. And for some time, the Mongols tried to assimilate into Chinese culture. And they had a lot of problems with that. You would have heard about that in our podcast about the different dynasties. And they also had a mail system, allowing for correspondence to easily go throughout the empire. You need to remember back in the day, this would have been before being able to send email or sending a text message or using any other type of electronic communication. Mail, written communication was the way to go. And without that safety, oftentimes, it was unpredictable and unreliable. With the Mongols, that wasn't the case. So how did it fall? Well, like I think Alexander the Great, they built an empire very quickly and very successfully at building the empire. Similar to Alexander the Great, though, they were not good managers of their empire. The Mongols had not, Genghis Khan and his successors, his sons and grandsons, were not by nature trained to be government officials. They were trained to do something else. They were trained to ride horses and shoot bows. They were trained to be warriors. And so this was a difficulty for them. In some places, like in Imperial China, the empire would begin to disintegrate from local resistance. The Chinese, the Han Chinese, and the Mongols did not get along. The Mongols did not like the Han Chinese, excluded them from the government. And then, so very quickly, within about 100 years or so, we have rebellions beginning to break out. This is long after Genghis Khan has died and Kublai Khan, his grandson, has died. You had less energetic or successful leadership. And we have, as a result of these rebellions, warlords begin cropping up in Yuan China. And eventually this leads to a successful revolt and the Ming Dynasty becoming established under the Hongwu Emperor. We see that in some places, like in Iran, they assimilated into the culture there. Okay, this was, I think, the most successful example of cultural diffusion, where the Mongols adopted Iranian culture. This would have been Persian culture, their food, their style of dress, their day-to-day lifestyle. And they were so successful at assimilating that effectively Mongol leadership just disintegrated and disappeared because they became Persians. There were succession disputes several times when you'd have a strong leader, pass away either violently or through natural causes. You would have several different Mongol leaders try to take over, and this caused fractures in the empire. This kind of led to this disintegration. Okay, again, very similar to what happened to Alexander the Great after he died. Very successful at building an empire, but not really at managing and maintaining the empire.